the virtual lecture series, Expanded Documentary, Ecologies of Images, Images of Ecology. This will be our closing session of this volume of the BMBF-funded virtual lecture series within our research project, Digital Documentary Practices. And I hope, well, I'm pretty sure that it will be the big final and that we will not only gain new insights by the presentation of our two guests tonight, Judith Aston and Stefano Odorico, but I think we should also try to make the topic of the session our method of our discussion, to wrap up all issues we've had so far, and those who might have developed within the meantime from the impulses of the last sessions. And here, every perspective, every voice is welcome, as we are polyphony tonight. So what's up? Tonight's lecture will focus on the work of the Polyphonic Documentary project, addressing relationality and extreme heat. As polyphony, there are many voices. I'll try to keep the usual rather monologic introduction pretty short. And maybe let's use it later as an opener for our dialogue, or multilogue rather, after Judith's and Stefano's talk. So, why polyphony? And why polyphony as the focal point of this last session? How can this concept, which is in fact based on literary theory and was introduced by Bachtin, how can polyphony help us to tackle the issues of this lecture series, which we set at the conjunction of media and ecology, mediatization and environment? In how far does polyphony allow us to critically engage with both concepts and conceptualizations of key clusters in this complex entanglement? And how can it help us in cataclysmic times, in times of social and environmental heat? In their seminal paper, The Poetics and Politics of Polyphony Towards a Research Method for Interactive Documentary, published in Alphaville in 2018, Judith and Stefano state, a key proposition here is that we should accept and celebrate complexity as the natural order of things, without needing to deny simplicity. And they continue, we need to be excited about polyphony as a means through which we can productively engage with complexity. Alongside these propositions, there goes a great illustration, an illustration I really adore. So, polyphony as a means through which we can productively engage with complexity. What does this mean? Judith and Stefano deduce from this row of approaches what polyphony can be in the context of the expanding field of documentary and beyond. Particularly, polyphony within iDocs involves much more than we might initially think. In fact, it is important to approach polyphony with an open mind, in such a way that polyphony itself can be embraced through polyphonic means. Polyphony thus involves multiplicity, a multiplicity of aesthetics, of narratives, of voices, of screens, of realities, of places, of times, of authors. And, as we will see in detail in a minute, polyphony can therefore be regarded as a literacy, a philosophy, a style, a composition, an intervention, complexity, an educational strategy, or a mode of transcultural communication. Foremost, however, polyphony can be identified not only as a theoretically used term in relation to iDocs, but as a tool and a method to define and frame the field further, using a wider set of elements than has hitherto been the case. Thus, they believe that it points to much more than just collaboration. It also speaks to questions of style, composition, and the idea of the carnival as an intervention. And it can be seen as both an educational strategy as well as a philosophical approach. A further mind-blowing passage in Judith's and Stefano's paper was then a passage in which they simply, or yes, simplicity is great here, and they simply list some keywords. And one should mention at this point that these were inspired by a great session they hosted at IDOCS in 2018, in which they invited a number of practitioners to enunciate their own personal provocations. So we have got responsibility on this list. Negotiated change, accept complexity, exclusion, methodology, juxtaposition, context, storytelling, equality, cacophony, understanding, agency and power, censorship, the power of sound, public intervention, mobilization, economics of polyphony, compromise. We've got the audience, form and style, reality and truth, technology, and of course, visual culture. Probably many of these terms, many of these concepts will pop up again today. So what a cliffhanger to now hand over to Judith and Stefano first, and then to us all as a polyphonic open space to think through together in great simplicity about complexity. Hence, let me keep also the official introduction of our two speakers short. Judith is an associate professor in film and digital arts at UB Bristol, dividing her time between research and teaching. Judith holds a PhD in computer-related design from the Royal College of Art and a master's degree in the social science from the University of Cambridge. She's co-founder of IDOCS. She's elected chair of the Royal Anthropologic Institute's Film Committee and a long-standing board member of the Journal of Media Practice and Education. She set up the Polyphonic Documentary Research with Stefano in 2020 to focus on her core interests in complexity, dialogic communication, emergence, and multi-perspectivity within cross-cultural and interdisciplinary context. She has published widely on these topics, has a lively group of PhD students exploring them with her, and is actively applying her work to creative health, post-carbon future research contexts. And currently, she is collaborating on this project, focusing on polyphony, together with Stefano. So here comes Stefano. He is a lecturer, a curator, and a filmmaker, currently lecturing at the Technological University of the Shannon in Ireland. He received a PhD in film studies at University College Cork, also Ireland, in 2011. The titles of the thesis centered on documentary and pragmatics is The Non-Fictional Address, a pragmatic reading of documentary film between construction and participation. He is the co-director of the International Research Centre of Interdisciplinary Storytelling, IRIS, and visiting research fellow at the Leeds Trinity University of UK. As an author, he published numerous works on film and media theory and practice, documentary studies, and interactive documentaries particularly. Moreover, he's the co-organizer of the Interactive Media and Film Conference, IFM, co-editor of the Interactive Film and Media Journal, and a co-founder and member of the consulting board of Alphabet, Journal of Film and Media and Screen. So let me now really, finally, hand over to you. I'm looking forward to the presentation.
Thank you, Anna.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much for the lovely introduction.
Yeah.
I'm going to share my screen now. I hope it works. To sound. Okay. Can you see it?
Yeah, it's there. We've got it.
Great.
Splendid. So yeah, I'm
Lovely.
going to start. Stefano and I are going to be a bit dialogic with this. Sort of a bit of back and forth between our slides. And we're going to show some examples from our latest extreme heat project within this polyphonic documentary project. And maybe some other people from the project are supposed to be coming in, but we can pick up with them in the Q&A, to bring more voices in. But Anna's part of the project anyway. Marta is, thinking wants to join, and various other people. So yes. So we're just going to start by giving a little bit of background just to contextualize the project. So convened by myself and Stefano, formally in 2020, off the back of the IDOCS the IDOCS panel we did in 2018. So on to the next slide. So this is just kind of the philosophy behind the project, in that at the moment we're looking at ideological polarization, and we're looking at climate change, the climate crisis, basically. And we're looking at what we need to do, what shifts we need to make within ourselves. So this quote from Gandhi kind of sums up what we're doing, really. So if we could change ourselves, the tendencies in the world would also change. We need not wait to see what others do. So that was an inspiring quote in 1913 from Gandhi that's a kind of galvanizing. We're decentering, we're decolonizing, we're working with people from all around the world. We can do that online, we can do creative practice projects together. So this is another inspirational quote from the Nobel Prize winner for literature in 2018 in her acceptance speech. She said, "We lack ready narratives, not only for the future, but even for concrete now, for the ultra rapid transformations of today's world." And in the literary world, there's a lot of experimentation going on with narrative, with nonlinearity, with multiple voices, with polyphony. So we're sort of bringing that into the film world and sort of building on that grand tradition of experimental film practices that's kind of being a bit suppressed at the moment. So yeah, that's what we're doing. And then we published a paper together in, what was it, 2022, I think, where we argued for the relevance of polyphony within IDOCS to eco-narratives, which give agency to the more than human, help us to compose or co-create collective non-anthropocentric and sustainable approaches to the future. And the second half of that quote from our publication, is, so in this sense, we see polyphony within IDOCS as making a contribution towards the development of multimodal literacies, which promote our ability to engage with complexity, navigate uncertainty, and celebrate diversity, both within and across species. So that was a book that came out about decolonizing interactive documentary practices. We had a chapter in there. And just while we're on that navigating complexity, I forgot to say at the beginning, the reason I've got Bristol, Norwich is because I'm in a house at the moment. I'm obviously living in Bristol, but I'm in Norwich at the moment in a 3-story house with 4 generations of family, my partner's family from America. And so that's me. There's a 1-year-old and there's a 4-year-old, and they're being told to keep quiet, but they could come in at any moment. And Stefano, meanwhile, is at an Irish music festival in the middle of nowhere, well, near Clare.
In a caravan with 10 people, not 4 generations, but 3 generations. So it's still quite a bit of people.
Yeah, so we're hoping everything runs smoothly, but we are enacting and embodying polyphony and kind of mess and multi-perspectivity. But within documentary, we're looking for narratives not based in consumption and extraction. We're questioning and critiquing, the over-reliance sometimes, certainly within Western filmic narratives, of drama, and this idea that conflict is baked into filmmaking, in storytelling. And we're looking at that relationship between conflict and harmony, in a cross-cultural way, and we're exploring other forms other than dramatic forms within IDOCS. And that takes us into the concept of polyphonic and transformative narratives. So we think that these are not to replace dramatic narratives within film practice, but they should be sitting alongside, and that we need these literacies more than ever, you know, so that we're consuming narratives in a range of different ways that are fit for purpose in the transformational times that we're living through. And if we can't get that bit right, then we would argue we're in trouble. If the way we tell our stories isn't fit for purpose, then you know there's a problem there. So we need to look at it, basically, which is what we're doing. Okay, so on to the next slide. Yeah, over to you, Stefano.
Yeah, so thank you, Judith, for that. So as Judith mentioned, we started pretty much the discussion on polyphony, bringing people together in 2018 at IDOCS. It started a little bit earlier, but this is when we had a kind of our first public intervention in a way. We had a panel with different speakers. Anna was part of it, if I remember correctly. It was a long time ago. And then from there, we went on and we published a full issue on journal issue of Alphaville, Journal for Film and Media and Screen Media in 2018-19 was pretty much the same year. This is available online and you know it's still there. So if you're interested, you can go and check all the articles. We have interviews and projects, all sorts of things. And then you know we kept going, including the IDOCS conversations. During lockdown, during COVID, we are all here in our houses, in our rooms. There is Sandra as well here. So, I mean, it's an ongoing process, and it's been like this for a long time now. It has been expanding quite exponentially, which is great. So the objectives of the project are mainly three. And put here in quite clearly in this slide. So the first one is co-creating a model for new approaches to polyphonic documentary, testing out ideas, which was somehow the starting point in general, the idea of practice, the idea of making stuff, and you know starting with some theoretical idea, then try these ideas out in the practice and see if these ideas work, or if they need a little bit of more work, or if you can actually expand these ideas even further. And the final one, the third one, is creating a community of makers with a theoretical underpinning and practical approach. Okay, so bringing together theory and practice within this community of makers. And this is very interesting because we'll talk about the community later as well. So the main, so how do we do this is through three main pillars in a way. The first one is collective reading. So we, especially at the beginning, we gather, and then we're still doing it now, but you know, we gather regularly in order to develop the theoretical framework. So we did a lot of collective reading articles, books, and everything, like, you know, kind of more academic in a way, trying to find that framework that we're going to talk about today. And then the second pillar is collective sharing of projects and practices. So the idea of making, as I said earlier, this idea of gathering together, working with like materials and trying to make projects out of this. Obviously, with always in relation to the collective reading, in relation to the theoretical framework. And then the third pillar is the collective use of tools, which has always been kind of one of main interests of the community in general, the polyphonic documentary community in general, which is trying these tools. And then Judith will mention the tools today and the developers, people involved in the development of these tools. Anyways, this is the project. It's called Polyphonic Documentary. I'm sure, you are actually all familiar with it. It's on a website online. You can browse it. We have a blog with some information about the project itself, different pilots of the practice, the publications generated by this project, and we will have a few more soon as well. Some information about us and the way to contact us, and also again, if you want to be part of the project, you can do that through the website. So over to Judith now. Hello?
Muted, Judith.
I'm waiting for Stefano to move the slides on.
Oh, yeah. Here we go.
Okay, so I'm going to pick up the pace a bit now so that we've got more time for discussion. So this is, we meet online, but we've got, we're using Discord, the social media site, and you'll see there's offline, there's 84 people there, somebody's online, and here we set up channels for the various projects. We have a discussion channel, share your projects, existing tools, group projects, events, reading groups. And so this is a place where we can gather and convene, and smaller groups can meet and discuss ideas outside of our online meetings. So that's the Discord site. And going on to the next slide. So, and then we meet online. So we said this started in lockdown. So we were able to kind of genuinely create an international group from, you know, many continents. We've got people in Australia, New Zealand, Canada, India, Turkey, you know, Europe, and we're starting to get some interest now, more interest coming out of China, which is really interesting in terms of finding alignments with what we're doing. So yes, so we meet online, and it's very much about process. So the discussions we have are really important. So the next slide. Okay, so what we do, we do the reading, and then we get together and we kind of together, we're co-creating, in that it's a very open discussion space. And Stefano and I are very much the orchestrators, but in these discussions we have, we kind of decide what the projects will be. And we did one on polyphony, and then this latest one on extreme heat sort of came through group discussion. And we asked people to submit short clips just on mobile phones, up to 30 seconds max, of 3 to 5 clips of people's responses to whatever theme we're working on. And then we put those clips in a big pot. We get everyone to sign a consent form, and then we can use them. We can remix with those clips and create these collective, collaborative pieces. So we're working with authoring tools. Is that the next slide, Stefano? Yeah, so at the moment, we're working with Korsakov, Florian, the famous Korsakov interactive authoring tool that's survived the many culls of interactive authoring software. This one still works. And so we are using Korsakov. It's an algorithmic tool that kind of resists narrative in a way. And it's a kind of exploratory tool where you use keywords, and you put in keywords, and then you can bring clips up. You can design an interface with as many windows as you want, and you start to see things in a relational way. So that's Korsakov. And then also, as part of our group, we're working with Stornoway, which is a local startup in Bristol that's it's known internationally as the WordPress of interactive authoring tools. So this is a product that's been developed commercially at the moment, and it's miraculously simple and super intuitive, but it's more of a publishing tool. It's more, in a way, as it stands at the moment, it's being developed constantly, but as it stands at the moment, it's kind of branch narrative, and it encourages kind of, there's 4 buttons you can have, whereas Korsakov you can have as many buttons, and this isn't algorithmic. So this tends to be more when you organize and you know what you want to say, speaking out to a wider audience, you can kind of structure quite, you know, multiple paths through in a more traditional iDocs, WebDoc type of way, I suppose. So yeah, those are the tools we're working with. And then I think the next screen is you, is it not, Stefano?
Yeah. We go back. Thank you, Judith. And now we go back to the theory, in a way. So obviously, when we talk about polyphony, we all know polyphony from kind of a musical point of view. You know, the etymology of the word is quite well known. You know, poly, many, and phony sound. So the idea of the melody, the idea of the multiple melodies versus a single melody, And as our colleague Patty Zimmerman, who is here with us today, has pointed out, polyphony is common in Renaissance and Baroque music, as well as in other types of music, such as Indonesian gamelan, West African drumming, and Estonian and Ukrainian polychoral folk music. So from this musical approach, multiple melodies, harmony, and so on, and cacophony when there is no harmony, as Anna pointed out at the beginning in her lovely introduction. Bakhtin built on that, picked up on that, so applies ideas of music melody, or kind of somehow starting point from a theoretical point of view with Bakhtin. So the polyphonic, he came up with the idea in the late 1920s. The idea of the polyphonic novel, a polyphonic novel that explores ideas and puts the author in dialogue with other characters. Okay, this idea of a dialogic approach in the not only in the output itself, in the novel itself, but in the whole process, communicative process, and obviously in our case also the creative process. So it incorporates the idea of the multiple distinct dialects and languages, as opposed to previous genres, such as the epic that could only incorporate a single linguistic form. Okay, so in opposition to what we had with the epic, one linguistic form, one voice, one single voice talking about some events, you have multiple languages, multiple points of view. This idea of multi-perspectival thinking that we've been talking for a while now. So truth is not born. So we have these quotes from Bakhtin that we really like, from Problems with Dostoevsky's Poetics. So truth is not born, nor it is be found inside the head of an individual person. It is born between people collectively searching for truth in the process of their dialogic interaction. Okay, so we all somehow own our own truth, and we bring all these truths together and we discuss. Okay, we have a dialogic approach to this. And now over to Judith.
Okay, so this, you might think, why are we looking at Bakhtin, who was writing in the late 1920s? A lot's happened since then. We've had a whole century, in fact. But I think we're going to explain, hopefully convince you as to why we're taking the ideas of polyphony from music, and we're then looking at how they've been applied in literature, and then how that it would be relevant to contemporary media contexts. So it takes us, this whole idea of the multiple takes us into the idea of multiple voices, multiple perspectives, and then multiple windows. So that's what got me interested in iDocs in the first place. These Windows interfaces that we have on our desktops now that are ubiquitous, that enable you to compare and contrast and put things in relation to each other. And that, rather than sequential editing, within film, you can have multiple windows. So that leads to, other ways of thinking about dialogism within our media forms. So the next slide just adds that element of dialogism in. So waiting for the slide. Yeah, there we are. So it takes us back to that idea of dialogism, not monologism. And I guess when Anna mentioned, this is both teaching, it's research, it's an aesthetic, it's a way of being in the world today that's facilitated potentially by the media that we're working with. And then, yes, the next slide takes us into Deleuze and Guattari. And we've done a lot of theory, going beyond Bakhtin. We've looked at Foucault. Can you move the next slide, Stefano? So
yeah, sorry,
we've looked at the
be
rhizome. We've looked at ethico-kindness towards the other, ethico-aesthetic kindness. We've looked at openness towards the future. Obviously, Bakhtin was writing in the time of fixed media, the novel, but we still think that his ideas within that mix have some relevance. And we've looked a lot at feminist new materialism. We've looked at Donna Haraway, Karen Barad, loads of stuff. But it doesn't mean that for us, Bakhtin is dead and buried. There's still important ideas. So yes, so then the first project we did is we asked people to explore what polyphony meant to them, and we asked people to submit these clips, and here we organized them by place. So this is a piece we made in Korsakov, where you see Stefano's, we organized them by place. Stefano was in York at the time. And then you could bring clips up, and then you could have other ones running along the bottom. And it was a very intuitive interface for it, going through and exploring the relations between us. And as I said, the conversations that stimulated within the group and the processes and the ideas we discussed were as important as the actual media pieces we created. We didn't really create them for a wider audience. It's more for ourselves to help us look at relational thinking and the shifts that we might make and what the media offers. So we did a piece in Korsakov. These are available. These two pieces are available on the website. And then there's also a piece in Stornoway where we were comparing the different tools. We're not just restricting ourselves to these tools, but this is what we're working with at the moment because we've got the developers as part of the group. And so we thought we could, do some useful work with that. So this was made in Stornoway. And again, we organized it by place. And you can see this was somebody was looking at Polyphony when she's baking pancakes and just musing on. They're all similar, but each one is different. And so this organizes, more structurally. You could click on chapters and you could look at all the clips from Bristol alongside Brandenburg, Ankara and Lisbon. Then you can go to the next chapter and look at another sequence of 4 clips. So we're not going to show those today because they are available online. We're going to focus on the latest iteration we're working on, which is about extreme heat for ideological polarization and for climate change. It just seemed that it was last summer when all these records were being hit, of extreme heat. So it just seemed a really appropriate theme for us to drill into. So Stefano's going to show a few bits and pieces before we go back to the theory.
Yeah, I'm going to show you now a couple of videos from this. So this is, as Judith mentioned, these are all a collection of, this is a screenshot from our Google Drive. So we have a collection, obviously, of video that people submitted. We have, as you noticed from the slide on the Discord, we have over 80 people, actually more now at the moment. But every time that we do like a practical iteration like this one with extreme heat and climate change, we have about like 20 people, and each person sent up to 5 videos. So you can understand that the amount of the quantity of videos is quite large, so we had to put some sort of order within this huge corpus of materials. So I'm going to show you some of the videos. But before that, I'll just go through a couple of slides. So I'm going to show a couple of videos directly from the OneDrive of the project, of the community. And then this is a project called Musings on Heat, made by Karen Boswell, who is one of the members of the Polyphonic project. This is done on Stornoway. So she created by herself. She decided to, because that's another characteristic of the project as well. If you're a member, you can actually have access to all the clips and you can play with them. Okay, you can remix them, you can somehow remediate them, you can do whatever you want. So she decided to have a go with it with Stornoway, and she created this project. I'm going to show you something about that, the way how she put in terms of relationality clips together. And then together with other members of the community, Karen also tried to play with Korsakov, one of the 2 authoring tools that we are using. And then I will show you a bit of this video. It's kind of a work in progress, so it's not a kind of a final project yet. It's not, it hasn't been published yet, but we will show you a video of this collaborative project that Karen put together with other members of the group. The way how they selected the videos here was through the aesthetics, through the look of the videos and colors, because that's something that we can talk a little bit about later. There's always we notice that people always somehow need some sort of structure, something to anchor on. It could be a place, could be a color or something, in order to find some sort of relationality, how to put these pictures in relation to each other. So I show you the video first. This is the Korsakov. kind of mosaic aesthetics. We have
So all the leaves have fallen really early this year.
The words extreme and heat make me think of our energy meter.
And it will continue like this. And basically what I did, so my first impression when I watched through all the clips that were provided to the Polyphonic Documentary project were...
Do you want to take off your screen share so we can look at...
Just to have a initial idea of how it works. And now, as mentioned, I'm going to show you our OneDrive, how it looks like. It's here. You can see this is only for the extreme heat project. And you can see there's a large amount of clips here. Just play a couple to give you an idea how they look like. This is Ersan, one of the members of the Polyphonic group. Filming is Kat. Sorry, there's a bit of a delay. Probably, as you already noticed, often these clips are very personal, are very reflexive. Let me pick another one. Maybe Nicholas. Perhaps someone from the audience, Anna. As promised, I'm going to show you the musings on heat made by Karen Boswell on Stornoway. Just again to give you an idea how the tool works in a way, but also how the ideas, the relationality within the project itself, made by one member of the group only. Sorry about my internet connection.
I was fascinated with the heat at the beginning of the
Apologies. I try to reload this. So you have a bar at the bottom with 4 options. Just turn away, pick one. Apologies, I skipped this. The link is available, so you can see this at home. But then I like to move to another project, which is somehow a meta project. This is somehow a documentation of one of our workshops, the Korsakov workshop on extreme heat that we have with Korsakov, with the creator of Korsakov, Florian, who is today with us in the audience. And what Florian did at the end of we recorded our workshop where people could actually play with these clips, discuss about these clips, how to put them together in Korsakov. But then what Florian did, something really nice actually. He put all these clips together into Korsakov. So he created kind of a meta project in a way. So we have a Korsakov project of our workshop where somehow interactivity plays out, and we can see how this looks like. So it's a real dialogue, a real kind of this idea of the polyphonic approach.
So I'm not sure how that's going to work, Florian. Yeah.
I don't know either.
So you can pick different bits of our discussion that we had. I picked this one, Ersan's cat, because we already watched the clip.
Moments have the ability to exist, like you say, in relation to each other, and it gives them a way that somebody might look at these things. I mean, Ersan, I think, has put 7 videos of his cat.
Yeah.
And then I love it. It's just the same cat in different shots doing nothing.
Ersan's really
The
interesting.
cat is so cool. I mean, like,
Yes.
it has a personality. We have seen it on Zoom live. It's fantastic.
It's really interesting. And that cat, obviously, is a very important part of his life, and that's he's communicating something.
Obviously, you can browse and pick different clips. It's basically a breakdown in different pieces of our discussion on extreme heat within Korsakov. I go back to the PowerPoint, and so this is a screenshot of PolyMeet that I just showed you, and now over to Judith.
Okay, so this is what we're doing here. What we just showed you there for PolyMeet is it's as much about the discussion and the process that this generates, and the way it kind of collectively we're working together and looking at how we might decenter our thinking, decolonize, think about narrative in new ways, think about different types of narrative that might be more fit for purpose in a less anthropomorphic way of being. And we've been kind of looking back to the theory. We're thinking this is genuine co-creation because we are a community. We are IDOCS people with a shared common interest. But then we're also, part of this is looking at how this speaks out as processes and practices, to wider audiences and communities. So we're kind of at that point now, thinking about what happens when we take this outside of the IDOCS community and start to think about this. And this is where, in response to Dorrit, Naaman, and Liz Miller, and Patty, and Mandy's work, around Mandy Rose's, around participatory practice, we're sort of thinking probably when we start working outside of our own community, it becomes less about genuine co-creation and more about participation and collaboration, because we get back into power imbalances. If we're a university and we're working on a research project into communities, the desire for equality is there are imbalances there. So we're thinking probably it's more participatory, but we're starting to explore this. So Stefano has been doing a project in Leeds with Ilaria, who is a postdoc student of his, and they've been looking at different communities in Leeds and the motorway that divides those communities. They've been using photography and video as an elicitation tool, you know, going around filming different parts of the city, and then putting them on a map, making this polyphonic piece, and then using that as a starting point for a conversation with members of the community, and the project could go further, and then other people could become involved and put their responses up. So that's applied polyphony in Leeds, Leeds Trinity, where Stefano is working. And then I'm working on a project, an Anglo-German project, working across Avonmouth in Bristol, which is a sort of a suburb, really industrialized suburb of Bristol, that is where the port of Bristol is. And it's kind of a real hotspot for energy futures. It's where all our recycling goes. It's where all the new nuclear electricity is going to come to a big distribution centre just outside Avonmouth. It's a really industrialised suburb. There's been a lot of pollution there over the years. And we're looking at starting a conversation in the community about energy futures and social justice. And then we're working across in a equivalent place in Germany on the Rhine. So that's on the Severn Estuary, and Hartheim's on the Rhine, and just over the way there's a decommissioned nuclear power plant in France. So we're looking at using these methods. We call it, following Bruno Latour, to make agential cuts. So again, as an elicitation interventionary tool, using some of these methods to kind of start conversations with communities and then see where that takes us. So that's another project. And then Anne-Marie, she couldn't be here tonight. She's actually traveling to Ireland. So she's looking at IDOCS as the 5th province, which this is a lovely video. I'll share this in the chat because she doesn't mind, again, if people don't share it, that just describes what she's doing in her PhD. She's putting different knowledge systems in dialogue, which is quite a thing of mine, that we can use these tools to put different ways of thinking into dialogue, different paradigms of thought, different epistemologies, and then we can, you know, try and see how understanding things from those different paradigmatic perspectives might give us a better chance of, you know, it's kind of like the more the merrier, you know, we by any means necessary, and we shouldn't reject things, we should be putting things into dialogue. So that's her project. And then there's Bharat's project. So he's working in the Western Ghats in India, another of my PhD students, and he's looking at ginger, and he's looking at follow the thing, following out from south to south rather than follow the thing comes out of geography. Ian Cook at Exeter, where you follow a product back from the West, back to where it's grown, and you look at the inequalities. But he's looking at it from his own perspective, living, you know, being from India, living in India, looking at ginger, and he started to put his recordings into Korsakoff, and then he's going to take that back into communities and use that as an elicitation tool, early days, to then kind of start a conversation in those communities and to try and raise awareness. He's quite an activist, to try and raise awareness about environmental degradation and the problems with massive cash cropping of ginger and what it's doing to a really important site of special scientific interest in India, and, you know, the kind of very get rich quick industrialization of the agricultural sector that's going on. So that's his project. And then the other project that we're just mentioning today is Karen's project, her PhD on Mozambique and decolonization and hip hop and music. So she's worked in a co-creative way in Mozambique, always looking for ways to kind of communicate her ideas beyond the written PhD. So she started to put this into Korsakoff and Stornoway. So those are just some projects, but we need to quickly get back to the theory. So yes, this is a relational practice, opening up new ways to think about and work with documentary film. But but what does that mean theory-wise? I think is that over to you now, Stefano?
Yeah, yeah. So relationality, as Judith just mentioned, is interpersonal relationships, relationship between human and nature, more than human, but also, you know, the relations as we noticed before in the projects and what Judith mentioned now, the projects that I showed you earlier, you know, relations between, you know, the pieces of content and, you know, the images, the aesthetics and all that. So Bakhtin, as mentioned before, already was ahead of his time, you know, looking at a dialogue and relationality in the late 20s. It was translated much later, so it arrived on this side of the world much later, around the 70s. So so for him, what he knew was modernism in a way. So when modernism was responding to Einstein theory of relativity, so everything started for Bakhtin from that, from relativity. He was fascinated by this. It was really interesting how he combined his idea of polyphony to that, and look at Dostoevsky and the polyphonic novel through this lens. He was interested in authorship as a dialogic form from the position of the single author and the fixed written text. Okay, so this is the starting point for us, the idea of the modernism. So again, what Bakhtin knew in that sense. So this idea of relationality for him was in relation to that. Then obviously moving on, getting closer to us, within the postmodern movement, so the postmodern concepts of time and space found their way into narrative theory through Derrida's idea of trace, which is very interesting for us as well. We'll talk about this later, but also something that we are developing at the moment, for which any sign acquires meaning only through its being embedded in the context and only through the meaning of adjacent relationality, and then obviously science in general. Okay, so this is like somehow relationality within a postmodern concept, within a postmodern world in a way, by Derrida. And then Judith brought the idea of relationality and polyphony into a meta-modern context in her talk here, the ID talk in the first series. So over to Judith.
Yeah, so I had a bit of an epiphany with this. I came across metamodernism, and that kind of seemed to, this was a talk for the previous lecture series for Anna. And in the process of preparing this talk, you know, it was the same stuff, polyphony, digital documentary. And I kind of was looking for some theory to ground it in. And metamodernism just kind of jumped off the page at me, because metamodernism is about, it's an and philosophy. It's not a philosophy of replacement. So I started looking into that, and this talk is available on the previous lecture series. So going on to the next slide. So metamodernism provides us with a framework for understanding ourselves and our societies in a more complex way, in a way than modernism or postmodernism, because it contains indigenous, pre-modern, modern, postmodern cultural elements, and it kind of also deals with time not in a sequential way. So it's not about indigenous knowledge being replaced, you know, by pre-modern or modern knowledge or postmodern knowledge. It's much more about putting these into a big pot and looking at how they can speak to each other. So how the ideas coming out of indigenous cultures can be put into dialogue with ideas coming out of modernism and postmodernism. So yes, it's not a philosophy where you have to believe in this or you have to believe in that, but you can might say it's a bit pick and mix, but you can put things into dialogue. And for me, that's what we need now. You know, we've got many big challenges facing us in the world, and we need to take a cross-cultural approach. We need to look at different cultural ways of engaging with ideas. You know, we're at a time of war where there's a lot of conflict, and these are dangerous times. And so the more kind of these ways of thinking, the more, I know it's quite idealistic, but the more we can learn to respect different points of view and learn from them and genuinely be interested, rather than, oh no, this is what I believe in and it's my way or the highway. So metamodernism, instead of only looking at what's present like the modernists do, or what's absent like the postmodernists do, metamodernists emphasize the process and have a key eye for emergence. That takes us into feminist new materialism, you know, the whole idea of emergence, non-fixity. The first quality of a metamodern mind is its ability to productively handle paradox. And that's really important And if we're looking within Western philosophy, you know, we've got this pre-modern, modern, postmodern. But if we look across at other cultures, at Eastern philosophies, you know, we've also got religions, we've got Confucianism. You know, there's so much we can learn from each other. We can find similarities and differences, and it's all about dialogue, which takes us back to Bakhtin. So next slide. Okay, so this is now, hopefully we've convinced you why we think Bakhtin is still relevant in an and rather than a replacement. Oh, Bakhtin was writing 100 years ago, therefore what he has to say is completely irrelevant. You know, great thinkers and great works are always worth returning to and thinking how they relate to contemporary contexts. So we've picked out these 3 terms, which we picked out at the beginning of this project: heteroglossia, carnival, and aesthetics. And do you quickly want to go through what they are, Stefano?
We picked those, yeah. So we started from these pretty much, which are the main you know, theoretical principles of Bakhtin in terms of the polyphonic novel. But you know, heteroglossia and carnival, and then we somehow added aesthetics, and then we brought this into kind of a metamorder context, as Judith mentioned. Also, I will show you in the next slide. So everything started from this. We use this as some sort of you know, the beginning of our theoretical framework in a way. So heteroglossia is, you know, the original concept of multi-perspectival thinking. Sorry. So obviously, heteroglossia, you know, for Bakhtin was the idea of the vernacular approach, bringing, you know, dialects together, different languages together, but also different ideas into different perspectives into one single creative process. It's all about the process with Bakhtin, which was back in the days obviously quite original, quite innovative compared to the modernist approach that was out there. So heteroglossia is the idea of the multiple perspectives, multiple levels, multiple thinking that we discussed earlier. And then the second,
I'll just speak to carnival just so we get dialogue.
Oh yeah, you do the carnival. Yeah.
So carnival.
It's a good one.
Yeah, it's about creating a space where a kind of safe space, you know, where you can transgress, where new ideas can come out, where, you know, carnival is a kind of great leveler. Everybody comes together in a big party, in a big carnival, and kind of plays together, basically. And although carnival now, you know, a lot of that's being commercialized, you know, festivals, we've just seen at Glastonbury this year, they've got you could get a camping slot with a hot tub. So, you know, the kind of original idea of carnival and festivals in this country, you know, these things do get appropriated and commercialized. But what we're trying to do is create that spirit of carnival within this project. It's a safe space, and it really, a key thing is that it's fun. And I think a lot of people who are involved with this, Karen's just arrived, and kind of she has things to say about that, which hopefully we can pick up in the chat, in the conversation, in the Q&A afterwards. But creating that carnival playful atmosphere at times when everything's so uptight, you know, is really, really important. So that's been absolutely fundamental to the project. And
absolutely. Since
aesthetics.
Yes, since the very beginning we adopted this approach, you know, the playful approach, having fun, being comfortable with this. You know, you could push the boundaries if you like to. You could try things out if you like to, but at the same time, you know, it's a safe space when everybody should have fun, you know, and share ideas and perspectives. And then aesthetics, which is very, 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 very interesting from a Bakhtinian point of view, because for Bakhtin, the aesthetics is not only, you know, it's not only based in the classic categories, you know, the object and the aesthetic values like truth and beauty and all that. But it's about, as for heteroglossia, it's about the process. It's about the process and also about the relationships between humans and the nature, what we had basically within the modernist world in a way. But obviously we can expand that into something else, you know, could be like the more than human and the post-human as well. So aesthetics is about the relationship between the world, between the world and nature, between people, but also obviously between people and the technology itself. So that's kind of our extension of somehow the idea of aesthetics in general within Bakhtin. And then
that takes us to, you know, the aesthetics, the rhizome, Deleuze and Guattari. We're now talking about mycelium, aren't we? And mushrooms and fungi.
Yeah, and this ethical kindness as well, you know, being kind to each other, trying to, you know, have a proper dialogue rather than always a contrast and, you know, an oppositional approach.
And so you'll be pleased to know this is now our last slide.
Last slide.
This is hot off the press. Stefano and I, in preparing for this talk, were banging our heads together on Saturday before he was a day late going to his music festival. My partner was saying, when are you going to get ready? We've got to go to mother-in-law's, you know, first thing on Sunday. So this is really hot off the press, where we just asked ourselves really difficult questions. You know, why are we using Baktune? Is it really relevant? What is the point of this? Why are we doing this? And we've come up with this idea where we've matched carnival, heteroglossia and aesthetics to some of the principles of the way we're working in the project. So carnival, mutable space and time, you know, the space we've got across many different countries, many different time zones, you know, it's a kind of messy play space, you know, where we're all struggling to find the time to do it, but we all are really committed, I think, to the spirit of this project and what we're trying to do. So we've created the carnival, and it's not about fixed text, it's very much about emergence. Then multiplicity and heteroglossia, you know, there's kind of a mess of these different clips that somehow, you know, people have filmed them on the mobile phone. Some are landscapes, some are portraits, some are focused on sound, some are focused on image, some are edited, some of them are really raw. You know, it's quite a kind of heteroglossic mess of us kind of quite raw personal clips that we're sharing. And then we put them into relation, and it creates, so there's something really profound going on there in terms of the sharing and the shared understanding and the ideas that we're working with. It's very dialogic, you know, dealing with complexity, very collaborative. So that's the kind of heteroglossia.
Also with elements, sorry, also to stop you, also with elements, obviously, of surprise and uncertainty as well in this context, because obviously when you do project in this sense, you never know somehow what you end up with. So there's always that kind of element of surprise within this concept of multiplicity, the glossia, that works very well for our idea.
And we had, when we first started with Polyphony, we just got all these clips in that kind of were quite a rag bag. We were thinking, what the hell are we doing? You know, what is the point of this? What will anything come out of this? You know, is there any meaning here? And then over time, you know, in the conversations and the pieces of work that people have been making, kind of meaning emerges in surprising ways, and really, as I say, really good conversations. But this next bit, the relationality, the felt experience, is really important, isn't it, for our aesthetics?
Yeah, because it's very meta-modernist. It's very meta-modernist. You know, it's what meta-modernism is, bringing together modernity and post-modernity in a way, you know, like learning something and use what I learned, but also being in conflict with something very dogmatic, post-modern. You know, I take side rather than other, while meta-modern is about the process. It's bringing all this process together and make it work, and, you know, feeling something. And that's, you know, it's part of our model. You know, our collaborators, and some are, our members of the community are here as well. They can probably say that later. The idea, you know, of feeling that experience. What do you feel when I create this? When I film initially, when I actually create, you know, an interactive project, and when I watch it later on. And I can say about something a little bit later during the discussion, perhaps. But, you know, it's always about this idea of feeling and the experience itself, which is obviously very personal and very unique for all of us. My one will be different from yours, and vice versa, obviously. And it is all about relationality, how we bring all these things together, and the relation between me and other collaborators, between me and the content, between me and what I feel in the world itself. I mean, if you see the first pilot project that was during lockdown, so there was a lot of, you know, the general feeling was like, you know, going out, the outdoors, the nature, and all that obviously was a consequence, a direct consequence of what was happening in the world. So this is, you know, definitely one of the key components of, you know, our model.
And that's where it takes us to kind of theories around structures of feeling. You know, we're co-creating a kind of shared structure of feeling, and then we're looking at, Florian talks a lot about this, about YouTube and how YouTube creates these shared structures of feeling. We're having these kind of, whatever, you know, shared experience creates these emergent structures of feeling, and that's where we're starting to think we're very much, it's happening within us as a group, as a collective, and it feels quite profound. But, you know, how can we use these tools and processes you know, out with communities in interdisciplinary research. How can these tools, these ways of working, be useful in interdisciplinary contexts? You know, climate scientists working with ethnographers, working with data scientists. You know, there's a real push in the United Nations now for people to be working together across different disciplines. How can we use these tools to create a shared structure of feeling, shared felt experience that can kind of lead to transformations and new ways of thinking and new forms of collective problem solving? So that's kind of where we're at. In true Patty style, nothing is resolved. These are all things, this is hot off the press. These are all things that are up for discussion. We're not saying IDOCs, the tools that we're working with, are the best tools for this. We're not saying they're their only tools. We're not saying polyphony is the only way, but this is what we're exploring. And we're just interested to take it further and extend that into communities and see if we can do something useful, really.